Everybody, welcome to this short video on what's coming up for this week. And for our class, our typical kind of rhythm for a lot of these weekly lectures, I'll spend a portion of it kind of going over the homework assignment that was due from the previous week, as well as look ahead to what's coming up in terms of content, in terms of homework for the upcoming week. So, just really quickly, we covered the plot structure last week, and I asked you guys to identify the elements of plot in the parable of the prodigal son. Many of you guys did a great job just explaining the exposition of the story and how the equilibrium of this family is disturbed when the younger son decides he wants his inheritance and can't wait for his father to die to get it. I wanted to just point out a couple things about this seemingly simple parable. I mean, I think has a very straightforward plot structure. We're not always going to work with really straightforward plot structures. If you'll notice that sometimes the inciting incident, it doesn't really come out until like later on in a short story, if especially the plot structure is forged in such a way that it's maybe told in flashbacks. We have to kind of puzzle some things together. But going back to the parable of the prodigal son, I think what's interesting is that, the climax, many of you identified it as when the younger son realizes that he needs to go back to the father and ask for forgiveness. And some of you identified it as well as when the father actually chooses to forgive the son. And I guess what I wanted to point out is that the climax, depending on what the initial conflict is, I think is up for interpretation. If you feel like the real conflict in the story is kind of something internal within the younger son, his kind of heart of rebellion towards the father, it makes sense for the climax to happen when he's out in that far country kind of thinking about his lot in life. Whereas if you identify the conflict as one that's really more kind of explicitly relational between the father and the son, you might, I think, rightfully have identified the climax as when the father, at that moment when the father comes and embraces the son. So that's one thing I wanted to mention about the plot structure of that parable. The second and final thing I wanted to note regarding the resolution and conclusion of the parable of the prodigal son is the really interesting kind of moment where the older son reacts with jealousy and discontentment at the end of the story. And I think there's a way in which that resolution and conclusion doesn't end so neatly, and there seems to be kind of trouble brewing ahead for the older son of the story, who maybe actually never physically left the father's house, but he's also sort of a lost son as well. For this week, I'm asking you to read chapter 2 out of our textbook, which mainly deals with how to read closely. And close reading, I think, we do it all the time when we kind of reread something. We're kind of puzzling through ambiguities, maybe with a text. And I like what chapter 2 does. It goes through Sharon Ode's really fascinating poem called Summer Solstice, and it gives you a lot of examples of making, of certain strategies for close reading that I've listed here. Now, your job for this week, one of your homework assignments is to take 2 out of these group of basic strategies for close reading. Maybe it might be making predictions or noting ambiguities, for example, and just applying that to the short story, The Use of Force. Okay, I think the use of force again, like the story of an hour is very, very short. It doesn't take you very long to read it, but I think it's one of these stories that leaves you with a lot of questions. So I want to have you pose questions. I want you to be able to kind of talk about it amongst yourselves. And that's why there's a discussion board posting due on the use of force by Monday, 9 p.m. And you can go ahead and just, do your posting and just in your posting identify, okay, well, I'm going to think about the author's alternatives for the use of force or something like that, okay? And I think close reading strategies really help you to become that critical reader. For example, with the story of an hour, and here's a picture of Kay Chopin. With her many children, she ended up having 6 children altogether. Kay Chopin's The Story of an Hour, you might, if you were kind of composing something about making predictions, you might have predicted that, Mrs. Mallard would have been very grief-stricken by the death of her husband, but and you might identify sort of the moment in the story where that prediction starts to change. Maybe if you're writing about reading for kind of for author's choice, why did Kay Chopin not choose to kind of reveal the name of the protagonist until towards the end of the story? That could be a choice that you think about and pose an answer to. And I think the way that we come to understand the individual name of the protagonist and not just the wife of Mr. Mallard, that sense of individuality, her sense of selfhood really kind of comes towards the end of the story, reflecting the journey that she's made of self-discovery and that sense of freedom and relief that really kind of comes over her. And I think what Chopin does so well with her short story is just the kind of the shocking ending and how you know people who are not privy to her thoughts as the readers are, they assume that she's died of joy that kills. And but I think the irony of kind of the shock of seeing Mr. Mallard and maybe the hopelessness of her future as as somebody sort of living in traditional patriarchal relationship is probably the real reason why she died of a fragile heart. Um, so uh, so along with the work that you're doing in terms of discussion board posting, you'll notice that I've also placed you into small groups for this week. I'm hoping that the discussion board and like, sometimes it can feel a little bit complicated, like finding, which group you're in. But all of you should just see, 2 discussion board postings available for you. It's and you've been just grouped into in no particular order, just random groups of 3 to 4 people in this class. Now, as a group, I'm asking you to choose one of the 3 stories from week 2. There are 3 stories we're reading: The Use of Force, A Visit of Charity, and then The Man in the Well. Okay, and I'm asking you to kind of explicitly focus on the use of force for like some of the individual assignments for this week, but I'm more than happy if you want to work with any of the other 2 stories for your small group work. And the small group work, all you're doing is posing 2 questions that you want to just kind of ask to the rest of the group. So for example, I want to start out with an observation question and kind of move up to more of a significance question. So the first one can just be straight like reading comprehension. So I might ask, what is the last thing that Marianne does at the end of a visit of charity? And I can just simply just state, she jumps on the bus and takes a big bite out of an apple. Okay. And then my follow-up question has to do with sort of, well, what's the significance of this? Does it relate in any way to kind of a greater theme that we see emerging from the story? So my follow-up question might be, why do you think that the author chooses to leave us with an image of a bitten apple? Okay, and so as a group, by Thursday's deadline, you want to be able to come up with your 2 questions. And the way that you're going to do kind of the submission of your work is, and here's our discussion board. You'll see that there's, the individual discussion board posting you're doing for the use of force. And then for your small group discussion, what you're going to do is, say I'm in group 1 and I have 3 other people in my group. I'm going to post, and I'm going to just use this like as a workspace. Maybe I'll just start a new thread and start saying, hey everybody, what story do you guys want to work with? And I'm just going to use this discussion board as a way to communicate with my other peers that I'm grouped with. And then in terms of, well, submitting my work, there's actually a Dropbox that's associated with the small group questions. So you can use the discussion board to kind of, work with your other group members and decide together as a group on which questions you want to pose. But the final questions you would pose to Dropbox, okay? And then what I'm hoping would happen too is that after you finalize which question you're doing, you want to go to, so if I'm in group 1, I'm going to see sort of 2 topics created for me. So the first one I'm just using as a way to communicate with my other group members. And then the second one I'm going to actually use to pose my finalized questions, and also try to answer somebody else's question. Now, the first part is the most important thing, and then the second part, if somehow the timing doesn't work out, you don't have to like absolutely answer somebody else's question, but I think it would be great if you could. I'm kind of experimenting with small group discussions this week, so some of the logistics of this might not work out all that smoothly, but let's just give it a try, and let me know if there's any issues. But yeah, but I would love it if in your small group of like 3 to 4 other people, you can just select one of the 3 short stories that we're doing and post some questions by Thursday night. Okay, so I hope all of that is clear. And if, as usual, if you have any questions, please let me know. And for this upcoming week, I'm gonna try to have an online chat session. It's an optional chat session. It's just for those of you who maybe need some clarification and just want to be able to chat with me through D2L, and I'll write out sort of the instructions for that. Okay, thank you, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. Thanks, bye.